So Habs fans, man, they hate me right now. Let me get into the comment that got me into hot water in my recent video. Slafkovsky last year had a very good season with 50 points, and after his disappointing rookie campaign, that was great to see him have such a massive jump. And while he'll probably never justify the first overall draft pick, he could become a solid top 6 option. So to give you a whole background, in this video, I spoke glowingly of the Montreal Canadiens. I said that they have a very bright future ahead of them. They have great prospects in the system. Spoke very glowingly about how they have handled their prospects and how they've come along well. I think this team should be a top team in the Atlantic in a few years' time. But this comment is the one thing that just kind of everybody was commenting on. Now, let me give you my rationale for this comment. Let me give you an explanation, I should say. When I'm talking about the number 1 overall pick and justifying it, I'm more talking about some of those fans that were very unrealistic, that think like, if you're a first overall pick, you're going to be a superstar level player at the NHL. I'm not saying that's all fans, but that's some. That comment was more talking to those type of people than actually comparing him to his 2022 NHL entry draft mates. That's more of what I was saying. In my opinion, I think highly of Slafkovsky. I think he could be a 60-plus point guy at the NHL level, and that's not a diss. And I'll go into an explanation of the 60-plus point and what I view that as in a second. But people did ask, like, well, idiot, who are you going to take in that draft class if you're not going to take Slafkovsky? There's no one there. Now, I'm going to also preface this by saying it's the 2022 NHL entry draft. It's 2024. We have 2 years that have gone by. It's not enough time to even really have this type of conversation because players develop at different paces. Like, there's someone in this first round that might take another year or two to actually hit the NHL level that could become a superstar in their own right. And then this video will age completely poorly because I'm comparing them to, like, I'm only comparing, like, the guys 2 years out from the draft class. It's the same kind of argument I've had with Alexis Lafreniere, and I told people at the time, like, give him time. Sometimes it just, you can tell the talent's there. And then last year he had a good year. Sometimes you just need patience. Not everyone is going to hit the ground running at the NHL. Sometimes they just need some years in the minors to kind of fine-tune their games and get used to playing against grown men. But if you're going to put a gun to my head and make me pick a player I would take over Slafkovsky in this draft, I could maybe flirt with the idea of Logan Cooley. He's got some high-end talent. He's got some great hands. I think if Utah, formerly the Arizona Coyotes, I think if they can surround him with the proper talent, develop him with some patience, I think Cooley's got some great upside to him. But that's not to say I don't think Slafkovsky's a bad pick. I think he's actually the right pick for Montreal. He's got some size, got some jam to the net. I like Slafkovsky. He's got some good talent to him as well. I think he fits perfectly with Montreal. I mean, he's got some size to him, which Montreal desperately needs. But if you were to say, like, in a vacuum of a guy that you would pick over Slafkovsky, most likely Logan Cooley. But again, I'm not saying that Slafkovsky's a bad pick. I think it's actually a great pick for Montreal. Now, going into my definition of a 60-plus point player throughout their prime, and that is success. Put that in a comment. I put that in a response, and some people are like, what are you saying? He's only going to be a 60-plus point guy. That's not his ceiling. I said that, yes, 60 isn't 60-plus. I'm not saying that's his ceiling. If you look through a lot of NHL players' careers, and you kind of average out the 10 years, you'll have some star-level players that will have that, like, 82, even 90-point season. Maybe they'll even have 100. But then throughout the most of their year, they're around 60-plus points. They're very, very solid NHL-level players. In my opinion, if Slafkovsky is 60-plus points throughout the 10 years during his prime, and you sprinkle in some years with 80, maybe even 90 points the occasional season in there, that's a wildly successful NHL career. I mean, even to say this, let's say Slafkovsky's the peak he'll ever get in a season is around 70 points. If every single year, if every year in that decade, he's 60-plus points, that's a massive success. Because in the first round, yes, you're supposed to get top-line players, but let's just call it what it is. most of these draft picks will never see NHL ice time. Or if they do, it's maybe a handful of games throughout their career, right? That's just kind of the honest evaluation. Not every single player is going to be a Bedard, a Celebrini. Well, I mean, Celebrini's young, so we'll see how he goes. But not every player is going to be a Bedard. Not everyone's going to be McDavid. They're not going to just immediately hit the NHL and find success. And most of them actually will never really see NHL ice time. So looking at how the draft works and how it can be kind of a crapshoot, if Slafkovsky's a 60-plus point guy throughout his prime and a top-line player, that's a massive win. That is a massive success. That's a very good NHL hockey player. Now, maybe there's a player in this draft that gets a little bit more points throughout his career. Who knows? Maybe not. But still, if you get a top-line player out of a first-round pick, yeah, I think that is a successful pick. So I kind of wanted to make this video relatively short. Well, relatively short. Kind of giving an explanation of how I view the first overall pick, how I view Slafkovsky as a player. I think he could be a damn good one. And I want to say this also, because after the rookie year, Slafkovsky, people wanting to throw him off the bridge, get rid of him altogether, and I was like, show some patience, the kid's young. It's just weird. I was on one side of the aisle giving patience, and now some Habs fans, now I'm the player that's not giving him enough credit. I want to say this, Habs fans. If this year, and I'm hoping this, knock on wood, I'm hoping this is not the case. If this year he has a year where maybe it's just 50 points again, or maybe even 40, don't freak out. There's peaks, there's valleys to development. We've seen this happen before. You know, it's hard to be successful at the NHL level. It is. It's hard to produce a lot of points at the NHL level. So maybe you could see maybe a slight dip in production. I'm hoping that's not the case. But that also doesn't mean he couldn't just turn around the next year and like hit the ground running and then become a consistent 60-plus point guy at the NHL level. You know, with prospects and young players, I'm just cautiously optimistic. I feel like when you start expecting ridiculous things out of them, to just expect them to be like a point per game guy the next year, you kind of set yourself up for failure. And I think overall as an organization, putting that pressure on a young guy can sometimes shatter them. But that's just kind of my rationale. I think Slafkovsky is a great young hockey player. I think it's fine he was taken first overall in that pick. First overall in the 2022 NHL draft. I was more speaking with some of the unrealistic expectations first overall picks can face. Like if they're not scoring 100-plus points every year, then it's a failure, which I think is absolutely absurd. That's my viewpoint, and I'm sticking to it. So let me know your thoughts. Got the balls to you in the next one.